In today's video, we'll take a look at the slice array method. Not to be confused with splice. This method, what it does is takes a part of the array and puts it inside another array and returns it. So let's start with a simple example here. So I have an array of some numbers here. I'm just printing it on the screen. What happens if I try to, for example, take the first three elements of the array? Well, we can use the slice array. You can say array.slice, and this guy takes in the start of that the start index of that sequence that you want to take from inclusive, and the end sequence that's exclusive. So I want the first three elements of this array. What are the first three? Well, the first one is definitely at index 0, and the third one is at index 2. But if we specify 2, it's not inclusive, right? So we don't get the element 2, so we have to specify 3 instead, right? And now if we try to run this, you'll notice, well, wait, hold on a second, nothing changed. What's up? Like, it's the same array, right? Aha! So slice, instead of just slicing the array in place, right, it actually returns a new array without modifying the original array. So this is a really big difference between slice and splice. Slice does not modify the array in any way, shape, or form, right? So what we have to do here to make it work, we have to take in the result of our slice call. So we have to say let result equals this, right? And then we can print it on the screen if we want to. We can say res, and now if we run this, you'll notice we get the first three elements of the array. So this is how it works. It's very simple. You plop in the start and the end index, right? Now, hold on a second. What if you don't specify the end of the array? What if you only specify the beginning? Well, if you do that, you'll notice there's no difference between the two arrays, but they are different arrays, I can guarantee you that. They're the same because I have specified here 0, and 0 is the start of the array. And if you don't specify the end index, it basically takes everything up until the end. So I can specify here, for example, 5, right? So take everything from the index 5 onwards, right? If I run this now, you'll notice I get 4, 3, 2, 1. So this 4 is actually at index 5, so it's inclusive, and we get that up until the end. Right, so if we don't specify the end index, we actually get everything up until the end. That's really nice. In some cases, it can be useful. Same thing goes if you don't specify the beginning, but to not specify the beginning, I have to actually pass in undefined as the first element, and the second element, you can say, for example, let's say here 5. So this guy should take in everything up until the element 5. Where the previous call was from the second 4 onwards, this guy is going to be up until the 5 in the array. So if I try to run this, you'll notice I get the first 5 elements, right, by passing undefined here. Now this is not the best syntax, but it does do the job. Okay, so let's say you wanted to take almost the whole array except the last element. How do you do that? Well, in most cases, you just specify here, let's say 0. Then we go, okay, well, I want the last element to not be inside the new array. So you want array.length. Well, that's going to give us the whole array. So we want -1. And that's nice. So this should work, right? So this works, but it's kind of redundant. We're passing here our array twice. We have to specify it twice inside the same call. It's not that great. It's also pretty long, right? How can we make this shorter? Now, the great thing about the slice array method is that it takes in negative indices. And if you pass in a negative index, instead of counting from the left side of the array onwards, it's going to count it from the right side of the array, basically from the end and back. So because of that, we can actually specify, instead of array.length -1, we can simply specify -1 here. So that would say basically take everything except or up until the second last element, right? So now, if I try to run this, you'll notice it's exactly the same thing. This is really cool. And you can do the same with the beginning index, with the start index. You can specify here a negative index, for example, -5, and this will basically take from the 5th element from the end up until the second last element, right? So if I try to run this, you'll notice we get 5. So this is the first element from the end, the second, the third, the fourth, and then the fifth. And since the beginning index is inclusive, we also get 5 inside our resulting array, right here, and we don't get 1, right? As I specified here, this is the first element from the end of the array, because the end index is exclusive, right? Now, last functionality specification, we're gonna go over use cases of this function. So this guy, if you pass in a beginning index that's higher than the length, it's not gonna return to you undefined. It's actually going to return a new array. So if I specify here, for example, here we have 9 elements, right? If I specify, for example, 20, right? Just beginning index from 20, and the end, we don't specify the end. We don't really care about that. If I do that, you'll notice I get an empty array as a result. This is the result. We get an empty array. Why? That's because that's how the specification has been written, and that's how it should work. Now let's go over use cases. So the first use case is very, very simple. If you want to create a shallow copy of your initial array, you can do that with the slice array method. Remember, the default parameters for this, for the beginning index, is actually 0, and the end index is actually the end. If you don't specify any parameters, then it should actually copy the whole array, right? So if I run this, you'll notice it's exactly the same, but the arrays are different, right? So if I, for example, let's push something to our initial array here, let's say 10, you'll notice the first one got the element 10, but the second one did not, because they are not the same arrays, right? It's a new array. Now, due to how the parameters work with the slice array method, you can use this very effectively using pagination, right? So if I want to actually split this array into multiple pages and show only some pages to the user, I will need some sort of way to split this array. So let's say we want, elements per page to be equal to 4, right? So we want 4 elements on every single page. How many pages should we get with this array? Well, if we count it manually, we have 1 here, we have another one here, and we want to have the last page just have the last element in it. So how can we do that? Well, we have this variable elements per page, and we can actually calculate the start index using it. So we can say elements per page times, well, whatever page we want. So let's say we want the first page. So if we want the first page, it's going to be 0. The 0 is going to be the first page. And then we have to specify, well, the end index. The end index is, well, basically the start index plus however elements we want per page. That's make the difference, and it's going to give us the elements per page, which should be 4. So if I specify here this plus 4, or plus, well, elements per page, well, that's going to be elements per page times 0 plus elements per page. What does that make? Well, that actually makes elements per page times 1. So we can simply use math here to simplify the equation. So now, if we try to print out the result, you'll notice I get the first 4 elements. That's really nice. Okay, but what happens if I change this? So what happens if I change this from 0 to 1? So I want not the first page, I want the second page, right? If I want the second page, I have to also specify this to be 2. And then if I run this, you'll notice I get the next 4 elements. And now here comes the cool part. If I specify that, if I want the third page, right, the third page has only this element, right? Basically, that should be the result. Well, what happens if I do elements per page times 2 and then here times 3? Well, if I run this, you'll notice I get just the last element from that array, and it doesn't add any more elements. You don't have to do some sort of math magic to actually calculate if you have enough elements so that you don't go over the length of the array due to how slice is being implemented. That's the really nice part about this. And everything here is by reference, by the way. If you have, for example, objects in here, I don't want to list them down because they're going to be way too many, but if you have objects here inside the resulting array, you're still going to have the same object references. So if you change this guy, you're also going to change the initial array, right? The object inside the initial array, at least. The initial array is not going to be changed. So that's about it with the slice array method. I hope you got something out of it. I hope you understand why this is really useful, and the way it's implemented is very, very intuitive. And if you have any questions, do leave them down in the comments below or on our Discord server. Thank you guys so much for watching, and take care.